It started with a glance. Chelsy Davy, Prince Harry's longtime ex, and once the woman royal insiders quietly whispered could have been the one, walked into a courtroom in London on January 21st. No press statement, no entourage, just a faint, unreadable expression and a phone in her hand. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But that wasn't the headline. No, the headline was what happened next. Because minutes later, Prince Harry broke. Not from a journalist's question, not from a legal jab, but from a text, a screenshot, a moment he thought was long buried. You could feel the room hold its breath. Lawyers stopped scribbling. One court sketch artist froze midline. Chelsy, calm and composed, didn't say much, but what she submitted into evidence said everything. And just like that, the prince who's made a global crusade out of demanding privacy found himself exposed. Not by paparazzi, not by royal courtiers, but by someone who once knew him intimately, someone who saw the cracks long before the world did. This isn't just another story about the royals. It's not a recycled tabloid drama or a rehash of royal rivalry headlines. No, this is something different. And you need to hear it from the beginning, because what's unfolding now might just rewrite the public image of one of the most scrutinized men in modern history. What Chelsy handed over in court weren't just private texts. They were personal ones. Honest, careless, sometimes cutting. The kind of messages you only send to someone who has seen your real face. Among them, a few stood out. And one in particular, directed at Meghan Markle, long before their love story had officially begun, made everyone in that courtroom shift uncomfortably. She's a rebound anyway. 6 words. Sent in what Prince Harry's team has described as sarcastic context. But you tell me, how many men casually call the woman they'd later marry a rebound? And the timing? Crucial. Because according to court documents, these texts were sent during a period when Harry and Meghan were supposedly still in the flirting phase. The phase when public affection was still forming and private doubts were still safe. So why does this matter now? Why should we care about a private message, years old, dredged up in a courtroom? Well, maybe the better question is, what happens when the person who's built a brand around truth, trauma, and transparency is suddenly forced to confront his own contradictions? And what if the woman holding the mirror, Chelsy, isn't doing it out of revenge, but out of obligation? This is a story about betrayal, about trust, about a prince's public crusade against the media and the private evidence that suggests maybe, just maybe, his greatest damage didn't come from cameras or headlines, but from his own words. You see, for the last few years, Prince Harry has worked hard to frame himself as a victim of press intrusion, as someone whose relationships, particularly with women, were destroyed by the British tabloids. And to be fair, there's truth in that. His testimony in court painted a devastating picture. It feels creepy, like you're constantly being watched, like you can't trust anyone, like every part of your life is up for sale. He talked about how Chelsy's life, as she knew it, was over the moment their relationship became tabloid fodder. He described becoming paranoid, suspicious, careful, and yet, within this same court session, comes a set of messages that tell a different story. A side of Harry that doesn't quite match the noble crusader image. Messages that mock, that downplay, that call into question not just his past relationships, but the beginnings of his most important one, Meghan Markle. Now here's the contradiction that's hard to look away from. While Harry was building an emotional case for privacy and protection, for being misunderstood and misrepresented, the woman he would later marry was, at least in these texts, a punchline, a placeholder, and maybe, depending on how you read the tone, a pawn. How does that line up with the man who told Oprah he found freedom in Meghan? The man who wrote entire chapters in Spare about her being his salvation? It doesn't. And that's what makes this so hard to ignore. But here's where it gets even more tangled. Chelsy didn't just drop these screenshots into the court record out of nowhere. She was called, subpoenaed, and according to sources familiar with the matter, she resisted at first, tried to keep her distance. But there was a moment, and we'll get to that later, when she changed her mind. And when she did, she brought everything. Not just the sarcastic one-liners, not just the rebound text, but entire threads, conversations, insights into a prince torn between loyalty, lust, and legacy. A man who confided in an ex about the very woman he'd later present to the world as his forever. The emotional stakes here aren't just about what Harry said. They're about how Meghan might respond. About whether these messages, real, raw, unedited, could rupture something bigger than just reputation. And look, to be fair, people say dumb things in private. We all have. We've all vented. Been sarcastic. Said something we didn't mean. But when you're Prince Harry, when your entire media narrative hinges on being a man changed, healed, elevated by love, those moments start to matter more. Because they force the public to ask, which Harry is the real one? The vulnerable father, grieving son, and reformed royal? Or the sarcastic insider who, at least once, made Meghan the punchline in a message to his ex? And what about Chelsy? What does it take to sit in front of cameras, lawyers, and a courtroom full of strangers and expose someone you used to love? To hand over a piece of your history, not because you want revenge, but because you're being told you have to? We'll explore all of it. Over the next hour, we're going to take you deep inside the courtroom, inside the texts, inside the strange, bittersweet, and at times devastating story of how Prince Harry's crusade for privacy may have just led him to one of the most painfully public reckonings of his life. Because this isn't just about Meghan, or Chelsy, or even the Mail on Sunday. This is about the battle between the stories we tell the world and the ones we wish had stayed buried. And for Harry, those stories are beginning to bleed. From whispered DMs to sworn court testimony. From private jokes to public shame. From emotional wounds to reputational scars. Somewhere in those messages is a version of Prince Harry that few have ever seen. Until now. But before we go any further, we need to pause. Not for drama, but for context. Because the next thing you're about to hear, the next screenshot in this tangled web, doesn't just shift the narrative. It exposes it. And it might just explain why, on that January day, with the world watching, Prince Harry put his head in his hands and wept. The question is, what did Chelsy show the court that made him break? Stay with us, because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What did Chelsy show the court that made him break? It wasn't just the content of the message. It was the timing, the placement, the way she handed it over. And maybe it was the silence that followed. Have you ever seen a room full of people suddenly lose interest in breathing? Because that's what it looked like, according to one journalist seated near the back. He said, and I'm quoting here, "The oxygen felt different the second Chelsy lifted her eyes from the exhibit binder and looked at Harry." Let's rewind. January 21st, High Court, London. The air was already tense, not because of who was in the room, but because of what wasn't being said. Prince Harry had been on the offensive for weeks now, publicly accusing Associated Newspapers of hacking, tracking, manipulating, and outright destroying the private lives of those closest to him. And now, he was finally in court to make it official. A prince sitting as plaintiff. That alone was historic. But then she arrived. Not through the front entrance. That would have been too obvious. Too theatrical. Chelsy Davy, wearing a simple navy blouse, no makeup worth mentioning, stepped in through a side door, one reserved for witnesses who, according to the court clerk, requested minimal visibility. She hadn't been on the public list of confirmed attendees. No press knew she'd be there. Some of Harry's own team didn't know until minutes before she was called. And when she was, the room didn't erupt. It didn't even murmur. It simply stilled. Imagine this. A woman walks into a room filled with royal lawyers, photographers, court officials, and one very nervous prince. And nobody moves. There's power in restraint. She didn't look at the reporters. Didn't glance toward the sketch artists already preparing their pencils. She looked only at Harry. And Harry, to his credit, tried to hold her gaze. But it didn't last. Because when she approached the witness box, her hand holding a manila folder slightly trembling, he looked away. And that was the moment it shifted. The energy, the narrative, the control. Up until that point, Harry had been driving the story. His statement had been powerful, personal, poetic, even in parts. But the second Chelsy sat down and that envelope, unassuming, boring even, was placed before the judge, something changed. Now, for legal reasons, not all of what was said or shared in that room is publicly available. Some details remain sealed, pending further proceedings. But what we do know is this. Inside that folder were 7 printed screenshots. Not full threads. Not emails. Just 7 still images, all allegedly captured between 2015 and 2016, and all involving Prince Harry. Some were messages to Chelsy. Some, reportedly, were group chats. One, in particular, was forwarded to her by someone else, though who, exactly, remains unclear. And the one that made Harry visibly lose composure? A short, throwaway remark, tucked in the middle of a chat dated October 2016. She's a rebound anyway. 6 words. The context? Not fully confirmed. But the implication? Devastating. Because in October 2016, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were already in contact. Texting, talking, flirting. The infamous, we're just getting to know each other stage. The phase when intention is everything. When feelings are fragile and reputations can be made or broken in a single emoji. And during that time, Harry described Meghan, the woman he would later defend in global interviews, marry in front of millions, and have 2 children with, as a rebound. The word hung in the air. Not legally explosive, maybe, but emotionally nuclear. And here's the thing no one's talking about. Harry didn't deny sending it. When the judge paused and leaned slightly forward, asking Harry's counsel if this exhibit would be contested, the silence from Harry's end was telling. He looked down, rubbed his temple, closed his eyes for nearly 10 seconds. The court went quiet again, and that's when his voice cracked. It was subtle, barely above a whisper, but someone in the back row heard it and confirmed to The Guardian later that day. He said, simply, I don't remember saying that. But no denial, no outrage, no cross-examination request, just damage control. And now you might be wondering, was this really the moment he broke? Was it just this single sentence? Or was it the weight of everything behind it? Because in courtrooms, context matters. But so does accumulation. Emotional weight builds. And when you're Harry, when the entire media narrative around your life is built on love, loyalty, and privacy, the tiniest fracture becomes a headline. Think about what it means, symbolically. The prince didn't shatter during questions about his mother. He didn't lose control reading emails about paparazzi ambushes. He stayed calm, focused. Even when discussing years of surveillance, press betrayal, and palace dysfunction. But when a woman he once loved gently placed a folded paper on the record, revealing not an attack, but a joke, that's what undid him. Because it wasn't the message. It was the mirror. It's one thing to be victimized by outsiders. It's another to be exposed by someone who knows the version of you you've tried to forget. And that's what Chelsy represented. Not just an ex, not just an old flame, but a living, breathing reminder of who Harry used to be. Before the crown tightened, before California, before Spare, she knew the insecure boy, the angry man, the version of Harry that joked too much, drank too hard, texted too quickly, and trusted too little. So when she handed over those messages, she wasn't just offering evidence. She was offering memory, shared memory, private memory, and now, public record. But here's what's even more unsettling. As Chelsy finished her brief statement, limited, technical, restrained, she paused. Just once. Before stepping down, she looked at the judge, not at Harry, and said, "There's one more, if the court permits." She pulled out her phone, unlocked it, scrolled, slowly, turned the screen to the clerk, and what she showed has not been disclosed. We don't know what was on that screen. We don't know who it involved. What we do know is this: the judge nodded, took the phone, read it, and then called for a recess. 20 minutes. Unscheduled. Abrupt. Harry didn't stay seated. He stood and walked out a side door, head down, no words. Chelsy? She didn't move, didn't blink, just waited until court resumed and quietly left through the same door she entered. Now, that's not normal. Witnesses typically exit immediately after testifying. But Chelsy stayed, and no one stopped her. Was it planned? Was it instinct? We don't know. But that pause, that unreadable gap of time, has now become the stuff of speculation. Some say it was her final moment of control. Others say she was waiting to see if he'd look back. He didn't. And that's where things begin to get strange. Because once court resumed, Harry's team pivoted. Fast. They shifted their focus from Chelsy's messages to the broader claims of press interference. They downplayed the emotional context and refocused on why these relationships fell apart, not what was said within them. A smart move, legally. But it didn't land clean. Because no matter how they tried to shift the frame, those 6 words lingered. She's a rebound anyway. Who was he talking to? Why did he say it? Was it a joke? A defense mechanism? Or worse, was it a truth he never meant to say out loud? We may never know. But the impact? Immediate. Social media exploded. Hashtag ReboundGate trended for 12 straight hours. Royal watchers and critics took sides. Some defended Harry, calling it a throwaway line from a confused man. Others demanded accountability, honesty, an acknowledgement. But perhaps the most telling reaction came from someone who wasn't even in the courtroom. According to an anonymous source close to the Sussex's team, and we should emphasize, this has not been confirmed by Meghan herself. She received a call the moment court recessed. A call that, reportedly, ended in silence.